gentlemen, my next guest is a New York Times best-selling author and the National Ambassador of Young People's Literature. Please welcome Jason Reynolds. Nice to meet you. Thanks for coming on.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Now, New York Times best-selling author, you've written 17 books total, but I want to get to that title, National Ambassador of Young People's Literature. How does, do you get a letter from Hogwarts? What happens? How do you get to be that?
No, you get a letter from the Librarian of Congress.
That's pretty close, man.
Absolutely.
That's kind of like a wizard.
It's just like a wizard.
That's incredible.
Absolutely.
What are the responsibilities?
I mean, you know, it's like any other ambassador, the typical responsibilities, or like a laureate. It's like the poet laureate system.
Oh, sure.
And so my responsibilities is to be like a walking cheerleader about reading and writing for young people.
That's lovely.
Absolutely.
Now, you write books. You write books for young audiences, and since we're on a late night show, there may not be as many of your core demo on watching the show right now. What do adults need to understand about children's literature? And as kind of a follow-up here, is that do you write children's books? I interviewed Maurice Sendak many years ago, and he says, I don't write children's books, I write books. And somebody said, this should be for children. So how do you, like, what do we need to know about children's literature today?
This is first of all, thank you for asking this. Children's literature is the cornerstone of all literature. It's the building blocks of all literacy. Without the people like myself who write this literature, they can't be the capital L literature writers, right? They can't be a Toni Morrison or all of our famous writers today, Jesmyn Ward, Kiese Layman, these greats that we love, unless there's somebody earlier to create them and their readership. And so that's my job. You know? Now, in terms of the great Maurice Sendak's comment, I actually disagree. I think that there are a lot of people who feel that way, and that's okay. I'm okay with it. Me personally, I think that this is a task of intention. This isn't something that I did and then they placed me here. This is something that I continuously, intentionally do every single day, because who deserves our intention more than children? Yeah?
You speak to children a lot, take questions and answers, stuff like that. Do you have favorite questions you've gotten from kids? Because kids, they'll ask you questions that you thought you were smart until you heard these questions from kids.
Yes, that's a fact.
Do you have favorite questions you hear?
Oh, I mean, one of the ones that I get most often is, hey, Mr. and Mr. Jason, what kind of car you drive? Right? Which, you know what, which is cool because what it says is, one, they trust me enough to ask anything they want.
Sure.
And two, if I answer it, then we've created a human moment between the two of us, which is far more important than anything I'll ever say about a book. Right? So, like, that's a good thing, but that's probably the most common.
Jason, what kind of car do you drive?
A cherry red Porsche 911.
Now, that's a cool answer. Did you have to go get a cool car once you knew you were going to be asked that question? Or did that car precede the question?
You know what? For years, I was riding my bicycle and walking.
Yeah.
But I ended up, pandemic happened, and I said, you know what? Children's writers, we should show them. We should let them know.
I mean, part of your job as a writer, I suppose, is also as a teacher in a way. But I understand that you feel like part of your job is really, and part of your best experience is to learn from the children. What is it you learn from your interaction with your own audience?
You know, I think young people can really show us what compassion looks like. They can show us what empathy looks. Think about it, man. Our biggest insult, our biggest critique, besides like, oh, all they do is TikTok, right? Our biggest critique is they're just so sensitive. We hear this all the time. We hear from comedians. We hear from everybody, right? They're just snowflakes. They're cupcakes. They're sensitive. When you really think about it, what we're doing is insulting them for being empathetic. We're insulting them for being compassionate because they want to see the many slivers of each individual free. Imagine that. So I think we have much to learn from them if we could just give ourselves a moment of humility to listen a little more.
That's beautiful. You call your books, among other things, love letters to black kids. What is the love that you want to express?
Acknowledgement of their existence. I don't want to teach anything. I'm not interested in it. I'm not a teacher. I'm not a parent. I want to bear witness to their lives. I think if we can put it's a famous Hitchcock quote. He said, "A face is not a face until I put light on it." Right? And so what that says in my world, when you transmute that, is that these young people don't exist in the world if we don't acknowledge their existence, if we don't write them into the stories. And so that's my only real goal, is to show to black kids, but for all kids, that like, you're here and people know you're here. And we'll continue to love you in your existence day to day, right? And I think that's important.
Your new book is called Stuntboy. In the meantime, what's it about?
Stuntboy is about a young man named Portico Reeves who has anxiety. And he lives in an apartment building with his best friend and his parents and his grandma. And his parents are going through a divorce. And so that anxiety is now metastasizing in an interesting way. It's flaring in an interesting way. And so he takes on an alter ego of a stunt man that he calls Stuntboy, because he wants to save his parents from themselves. Right? He wants to do the hard stuff so that the real heroes don't have to harm themselves. And it's just a cool story that kids can read and parents can use as a way to discuss the changing sands of family that so often happen.
Did you have anxiety as a child?
Oh, I've had anxiety my whole life.
How do you deal with it?
A few ways. One, there's medication, and there's therapy.
Sure.
And honestly, there's talking about it, normalizing it, making sure that people understand that there's nothing wrong with us, right? And that honestly, anxiety in and of itself is perhaps just an elevated part of our sympathetic nervous system, which means that maybe it's not about it being a weakness, but instead being a strength that is connected to our compassion. That I'm so compassionate that the mere thought of something wrong makes me anxious. That I'm so empathetic that the mere thought of someone in pain makes me anxious. This is a good thing.
And also that there might be things to be anxious about in our world right now.
Absolutely.
That might be one of the reasons why it's rising. And that leads to my last question, is that you have a, not an enviable distinction, which is that you have 2 books on the American Library Association's most banned books list for 2020. And what is happening to certainly American culture right now, and certainly the politicization of American culture, is very worrisome. It gives me a lot of anxiety. And I'm curious, what do you want people to know about the censorship of books in America right now?
That first and foremost, it's not a badge of honor. For those of us who are going through it, for those of us on that list, it's not a badge of honor. People always say, congratulations, you're doing something right. It's like, yeah, but at the same time, there's been access cut for all the young people who might need these books, and where they only might get them in schools. You can't take for granted that there may not be a library or a bookstore in everybody's community, or that there may not be a $20 bill to go and buy the books that they no longer have access to because of these bannings, right? Second of all, I just think people should understand that at the end of the day, we as adults, we claim that we want our children to grow up to be better than we are. And in order to do so, they must have the information that we did not have. So to stop that information really makes us all hypocrites. And it's something that we should be thinking about.
His new book, Stuntboy, in the meantime, is available now. Jason Reynolds, everybody. We'll be right back.